So this is a review for Double or Mutton. And with me today to give their thoughts on this cartoon, and because it's Double or Mutton, I've got double the guests for you, my good friends Luke Perkins and Eli Copperman. Say hi, guys.
Morning, Anthony. Morning, Luke. And good morning, Vietnam. Oh, wait, wrong movie. Sorry, folks.
Hello, Anthony. Hello, Eli.
So as mentioned, this is a review for Double or Mutton, released on the 23rd of July 1955. It's the 745th in the series, and it's directed by Chuck Jones. You can find this beautiful restoration on the Looney Tunes Collector's Choice Volume 4 Blu-ray set, and weirdly enough, it's been doubled up on the newly released Looney Tunes Collector's Vault Volume 1 Blu-ray, which means that a potential Volume 2 will have an extra cartoon to compensate.
And what better way to do so than during this cartoon's 70th anniversary, am I right?
But hey, if they're going to duplicate a cartoon, might as well be this one because it's actually pretty good. And it certainly doesn't hurt that a short called Double or Mutton is doubled up, right? Am I right? It is under copyright. You will not find this on YouTube unless Warner Bros. Themselves choose to upload it on their own channel. But in case you haven't seen this one, it's your standard Sam Sheepdog and Ralph Wolf short where they both clock in for their shift. Ralph tries to steal the sheep, Sam protects the sheep, and we just get a whole bunch of gags involving that. Nothing too deep, nor does it have to be. It is the kind of short that it is. Now, in terms of trivia, one interesting thing about this one is that this is the first short where it's established that the two of them are indeed co-workers.
Yeah, and if I have to say anything right now about Ralph Wolf and Sam Sheepdog, I will say wholeheartedly that I do admittedly enjoy these characters and I enjoy their dynamic a lot, but since I've never really talked about them much, I will admit that I don't think their dynamic is quite as strong as another character that Ralph looks very similar to, and that's Wile E. Coyote. And then, of course, Wiley's dynamic with the Roadrunner. I do like the idea that Chuck Jones and I guess Mike Maltese as well eventually played with men being just, friendly coworkers who don't really have anything against each other, just doing their job. At the end of the day, it's never anything personal. It's just business, I guess. I don't think that's quite as strong. It's because Wiley has always wanted to catch the Roadrunner and eventually eat him, whereas Ralph is trying to avoid Sam so he can take the sheep. And I feel like for every attempt that Ralph does in trying to subdue Sam so he can get the sheep, he's not really after Sam necessarily. He's more so after Mutton. But at the same time, make no mistake, just because I don't think their dynamic is as strong as Wiley or the Roadrunner doesn't mean I don't think they're fun characters in their own right. And I think, Luke, you had a really good point to say about them too, but I'll let you have that one.
Well, what's interesting about the whole coworkers thing, the concept of the Sam Sheepdog and Ralph Wolf cartoons is that it's basically a typical chase cartoon, but the whole ordeal is treated as if it's like a 9-to-5 job. And with every cartoon Chuck and Michael does with that concept, they keep building on top of it. For the first one, it's mainly just kind of a punchline and in other subsequent shorts. But then with something like this one, Double or Mutton, yeah, it is really established that they're co-workers. And then they take so much steps even further with the next one, which is Steel Wool. They are basically next door neighbors in that one. And in Sheep in the Deep, they stopped their whole fight just to have a coffee break. And the one before Sheep in the Deep, which is Ready, Willing, and Able, Sam Sheepdog has this old car, and then Ralph Wolf has a really fast hot rod. And you can tell there's probably a bit of commentary on like what they kind of pay for all that stuff. And then in the final Ralph Wolf and Sam Sheepdog, which is woolen underwear, quit snickering, by the way. The way I would describe their relationship in their final short is that it's basically that one meme where it's like, and they were roommates. Oh my God, they were roommates. So it's really interesting and really funny to see how much they pushed that.
So the first shorts just had Sam be the worker, and the second one had them both be workers for a gag at the very end, but they weren't really co-workers. It's just a little punchline where they have night shift workers just taking over. But now Chuck Jones and Mike Maltese go the extra step and establish that they seem to work for one company doing all of this. Now, what kind of a company hires these two characters to compete against each other to get sheep? I don't know, but it's established that way, and it makes things even more funnier that They're all cordial before and after their work shifts, but during the shifts, they just go all out.
Yeah, that is a pretty weird dynamic. Although them having to do their job, you could view that as like not even this cartoon, but just their whole dynamic as a commentary on people's relationships within their jobs and outside of their jobs. I'll admit right now, the vast majority of my most personal, like closest friends are outside of any job I've ever had. And at the same time, that's not to say I'm not friendly with any coworkers, but Ralph and Sam, I imagine, are nowhere near as combative to each other in their personal lives outside of their jobs. Because at the end of the day, a job's a job. It's never anything personal. It's just business at the end of the day.
So you can't say that they're not dedicated to their jobs, right?
Yep. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you got to do. Work is work, and dedication is not relegated to any relationship for the most part.
And while this part should be obvious, but for the few that aren't aware, the title itself is a play on the term double or nothing, which is a gambling term. So you put your bet down. If you win, you get double the winnings. If you lose, you get nothing. So that's where that comes from. So what I'm going to do now is go through the short from start to finish and go through my observations within, starting with the fact I just like how on the opening titles we hear Mary Had a Little Lamb. I guess it is appropriate.
I mean, hey, where else are we going to hear that tune other than a cartoon having to do with sheep in some capacity, right?
Yeah, so the opening title of the short is Mary Had a Little Lamb, and the cartoon itself is scored by Milt Franklin, and it's really funny because Milt Franklin would rarely do musical puns. In contrast to Carl Stalling, Milt would often prefer to sometimes do original cues and atmospheric scores while also keeping in with the spirit of Carl's scores and being able to still know that, hey, this is a cartoon, you can be able to have fun with it. There are some occasional shorts where he would actually use popular music to use as a score, like Showbiz Bugs, but with the post-shutdown, I think they had a bit of a more difficult time using popular songs from Warner Brothers and with some of their scores, with some exceptions like We're in the Money, of course. And even like in the beginning, after the whole Mary Had a Little Lamb deal, Milt Franklin scores the opening scene with a sound-alike the William Tell Overture, the morning theme. But it doesn't completely sound like the morning theme. It sounds like a sound-alike. Other cartoon composers, like the ones at Disney, like Oliver Wallace or Paul J. Smith, often preferred to give their shorts they worked on their own themes and leitmotifs. I'd say it's kind of similar to how the scores in the Looney Tunes cartoons revivals worked. Even though Joshua Moshier and Carl Johnson's scores were able to, they would do a few musical puns and sort of that thing. They rarely were able to use popular Warner Brothers songs. They often had to use, like, songs in the public domain or pieces of classical music. But oftentimes they would surprise us, like a usage of Shortening Bread or Powerhouse. Even in one short called Pain in the Ice, which is a Tweety and Sylvester short, Carl Johnson uses The Cat Came Back for a gag. And I'm not talking about the song from the 1936 short. I'm talking about the one that was used in the 1987 short from the National Film Board of Canada, where it's basically like, but the cat came back the very next day. There's also a great YouTube channel out there called Looney Tunes Songs that feature compilations of the usage of certain songs in the cartoons, like We're in the Money or Lullaby of Broadway, etc. And if you watch those videos, you'll notice that, with some exceptions, multiple songs stopped being used by the time of the post-shutdown era. And I have to wonder if Milt had to be creative making sound-alikes if he couldn't get certain rights.
But I really love the establishing shot of this short, and it looks really good. In this case, we have Philip Degard pulling double duty. Not only does he do the backgrounds like he usually does, but he also does layouts here. So noted background artist Maurice Noble hadn't returned to the studio yet, so you have a few shorts where you've got Ernest Nordley doing the layouts, but here, yeah, you've got Philip Degard doing double duty. So it's interesting to see the difference in what these layout artists end up doing to showcase all the gags. but it certainly is competent. And I would imagine with Philip Degard working with Maurice Noble's layouts and Ernest Audley's layouts, he would be pretty well equipped to do them on his own.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think if nothing else, Philip Degard in many ways was kind of an unsung hero to Chuck Jones. Out of all the artists who worked for Chuck during that time, I think he worked for Chuck the longest, not in terms of his animators, but in terms of like his layout or background team. Like he joined Chuck's unit before Maurice Noble even did in the early 50s. Like he was there in the late 40s, I imagine, but I don't know too much of his other work outside of Warner Brothers, other than him working at Walter Lantz in like the mid 40s on some Woody Woodpecker and Swing Symphony cartoons. His work, it should not be understated enough. And I love that he's doing double duty here. Rarely are layouts and backgrounds done by just one person alone, you know? But yeah, Philip Degard, his work is mostly well known for the colors that he would do. But here, I think it's because given that he worked with Chuck for so long, it's honestly not too bad of him aping Maurice Noble's style, I guess before Chuck could even snag Noble back to the studio post-shutdown. It feels kind of stylized and artsy, but also a little scratchy, so to say. Like he's almost aping the UPA style rather than just Chuck Jones's style. But I guess that makes sense since, hey, Chuck Jones was more, to a certain extent, one of the heroes of the UPA.
But we see that Sam and Ralph rock up to work and end up punching in for the day. I wonder how many workplaces these days have a punching clock like this, because a lot of times these days it's either an eye scan or a fingerprint scan or whatever. So I wonder how many workplaces still uses the old-fashioned punching card. So if your workplace still has that, definitely let me know in the comments, because I'm definitely curious about that. I've certainly never worked anywhere with a punch-in clock like this, even from back in the early 2000s when I actually entered the workforce. And we even see the punch card shows that they always have lunch at noon. And while Jones didn't have to do this, I like the added touch of them when they're clocking in, clocking out, how they're actually different times, which is the reality, because you're not going to clock on the exact same time every time. You might be 1 minute early or late or whatever. So again, it's a nice little touch.
It's so funny we're even talking about time clocks. Like the Looney Tunes writers and animators would use those time clock gags in a lot of cartoons. Certain examples including Bob Clampett's Tick-Tock Tuckered, as well as Porky's Bad Time Story, and Frank Tashlin's Swooner Crooner, and of course, Don't Give Up the Sheep, the very first Ralph and Sam cartoon. But the funny thing is, as far as time clocks go, I don't know too much about how the Warner Brothers staff used the time clock in real life. I'm sure they had to use it no matter what, because that was standard protocol back then. But the Disney studio, funny enough, at least according to people who worked there in the 70s, they had a time clock up until maybe the mid to late 80s. And the funny thing is, their entire production schedule was relegated to a time clock. That's not to say that's necessarily a bad thing, but the then new heads at Disney got rid of the time clock so they could do a more updated and modernized punch in, punching out method, because they said you can't put creativity on a time clock. And I'm sure Chuck Jones and Mike Maltese would agree with that sentiment, but at the same time, just given that that was standard protocol at the time, I'm sure they wanted to lampoon that to a certain degree rather than just showcasing.
So we see that Sam, he's ready to go, he's watching over all the sheep, and Ralph, being the professional, he makes sure he waits for the whistle to blow as he starts his workday in getting the sheep. So first up, Ralph tries to burrow under the fields, so it's a nice simple joke, so he's burrowing, and as he pops out, who does he find? Of course, Sam is right there. You will notice that Sam is kind of like droopy in this shot. He just appears out of nowhere, so you think he's in one spot, he appears in another, but I love the layout here where you see Sam clearly on the actual cliff, but as you pan over when Ralph is burrowing underground, Sam is already at the point of destination with that wonderful expression, so it's a great gag to open up, and wonderful animation as well. And if you slow-mo that one, I like the multiple drawings that you see, but we see that Sam has a mallet, and off-screen, we hear a nice big whack. And Ralph even buries the hole and just thinks, okay, what is he going to do next? Which leads us to our next gag.
I wouldn't be surprised if Chuck was just begging to do those kinds of fun character layouts and expressions that his animators would eventually plus. Even the animators like Ken Harris or Richard Thompson or Abel Levitow were more than happy to do so, because at the end of the day, given that they were resettling into the studio after that shutdown, they were probably trying to ease themselves into what they were more familiar with. But man, did they make up for that, because, hey, 6 months of not being able to make funny cartoons, that didn't mean anything. They were still more than happy to do it, you know?
So this is similar to the Roadrunner series, where you've got a nice mix of gags that are really quick or very simple, and then you got ones that are incredibly complex. So this one is one of the more complex ones, but that's okay. It's executed really well here. So Ralph now makes a tightrope over a field. He throws a spear that has a rope attached. He walks across the tightrope, snags a sheep with the lasso, and makes his way back towards the cliff. But in another wonderful bit of layout which tells the joke so well, we see that Sam is right there holding onto the rope. But I love the score as Ralph is shuffling over on the rope itself as he approaches Sam holding onto the rope. But, you know, he could have ended there with Sam letting go of the rope, but no.
Oh yeah, you can just feel the suspense happening.
Ralph thinks he's made it to safety all the way out to the spear, but no, Sam is right there again. He's like drooping this short, and he just throws a spear over the cliff, and we end up in our next gag.
The sequence with the tightrope shows just how much the Ralph Wolf and Sam Sheepdog cartoons really did differ from the Coyote Roadrunner cartoons outside of premise and overall idea and pacing. With a different setting, a typical gag like Wile standing on gravity and not noticing until he completely falls under like a long cliff probably wouldn't work, mainly because we aren't working with the deserts here. We are working with these forests. Plus, with Sam Sheepdog also being one step ahead at certain points, Chuck and Michael Maltese had to be very creative with this stuff. And also, that bit in the end where Ralph zings out because Sam throws a spear like a javelin, you could almost see the tiny impact smoke, almost like an alternate version of the cliff gag from the Coyote and Roadrunner cartoons. You know, the whole like bump like that.
Now, this part I like, where Ralph appears to have a win, so he shoots a rocket at Sam, and it appears that Ralph has won. Sam has been shot off to some unknown location. Look at the animation of Ralph's joy here. It seems like he doesn't win too often. Later on, when we see his cave, we'll see that he would certainly have won on occasion, but here, just the joy of him going down this cliffside's hilarious.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. If I do have to give like one, not really a criticism of these cartoons, but I guess just something to like ease the blow a little bit, it would be nice if Ralph won just once, like maybe he won once, kind of similar to Wile, but after he thinks he caught a sheep, that maybe it turns out to be like a ram or something, and it just beats him up. Like that kind of gag, obviously. Like, let him still enjoy his victory, but have him still get his just desserts at the same time. But yeah, at the same time, I totally get the feeling of him feeling like he just won, you know? It's a relatable feeling that even us underdogs more or less relate to.
The jaunty run Ralph does after Sam gets caught in that rocket kills me. To me, it looks really funny, mainly because it's staged from a specific distance. And I'm just imagining someone seeing that silhouette of Ralph just jauntily running down the hill and being really confused as to what's going on.
And you've even got that wonderful character moment where he's in the field, he's with the sheep, he's pretty much acting like me when I'm at the shops trying to find a really nice tomato to buy, where I'm squeezing tomatoes to make sure that it's the right vegetable that I want. But my goodness, just the glee in his face when he's picking the right sheep that he wants to snatch and eat.
I also find the shot of Ralph Wolf just like, oh my gosh, look at all these sheeps I could get. And like you said, picking one from like a supermarket or like at the store. It's really funny to look at. Great gag. Now, I'm very confident in saying that the little jaunty skip that Ralph does when he's carrying the sheep during the rocket gag, and then with the next one, with Ralph Wolf acting like Little Bo Peep, is definitely 100% animated by Ken Harris. It just has to be. It's very articulate and smooth, and everything is timed very nicely. The stick that Ralph holds also has a slight delay with the skip, making it a nice secondary action than if it were to be given the same amount of timing.
But no, in another great bit of layout, you see Ralph walking along nonchalantly and whack. Sam had just ended up being stuck in the tree. Ralph ends up being knocked out. Now, this is one of those gags where it almost worked. And just like with the Cody, he doesn't try the same thing again. I would argue that if he tried this again, maybe he would win next time. Who knows? But we are in the next gag, and my goodness, you have to wonder, does Ralph have this Little Bo Peep costume tucked away somewhere? It looks so ridiculous. There's even the added touch of him adding the blush to his face, the pink little dots there. So he definitely commits himself to the gag here, I tell you that.
It's the little artistic character moments that go a long way, you know?
But I love the contrast of the animation of him skipping and then him whacking Sam on the head with the stick. I think that's called a shillelagh. But Ralph just has to drive the point home that, hey, he's actually part of that nursery rhyme. Little Bo Peep has lost her sheep, and makes the point to grab another sheep from the field. It's like, okay. Such a weird gag, but sure enough, he grabs the sheep and takes it to the cave. Now, if you look at the background of this cave, what I was alluding to earlier, that he was successful at some point, you see some bones in the background. So I guess Ralph has been successful in the past. Or maybe he just fails day after day after day and ends up ordering in and just leaves chicken bones lying around. I don't know. But this gag here is something that Chuck would revisit very often, including the upcoming Nightmare Hare, and even in A Sheep in a Deep, where you've got a character just unzipping themselves out from a costume. So the sheep that was stolen, yeah, Sam pops out from the actual sheep like it's a costume, and my goodness, Ralph's expression once he realizes that Sam was in that sheep costume, and he even just tickles Sam's chin like that. Perfect. This is probably my favorite bit of the short. It's so funny.
I'm not going to say which cartoon does the gag better or worse, but in both cartoons, they both did do it to pretty humorous effect, although that one has more or less to do with sorcery, whereas this one is just cartoon logic for the sake of it, and it's beautiful. I love it.
That music cue that plays when Sam couches Ralph by the neck, it was later reused in Invasion of the Bunny Snatchers in 1990, directed by Greg Ford. Which means that there's a possibility that the music-only track for this cartoon survived in the vaults. But for some reason, even though the collector's choices and collector's vault is like a blessing to a lot of us Looney Tunes fans, I don't know why for some reason they don't seem to give out a lot of bonus features for some of these Blu-rays. Like, there's no commentaries, no short tiny featurettes, not even like music only or music and effects only tracks in these bonus features, and some of them probably have already survived. It's kind of weird, but hey, we do know that it does survive in some capacity.
Now we get a whole bunch of very quick gags. So the first one is the helicopter, which, gotta say, Ralph is pretty talented. You know, he can fly a helicopter, and where does this helicopter come from? I don't know, nor do we need to know, but I just think it's funnier that way. So he tries to grab a sheep using one of those claw devices. It kind of reminds me of those claw machines where you almost never win anything because the claw is so damn loose.
Oh, do you mean those claw machines that were basically rigged and you almost never won anything? Oh, I love those games. They were the best at carnivals.
But Sam's having none of that and ends up just yanking down the whole helicopter, which, if you slow-mo that one, just the way the helicopter crushes as it impacts the ground is hilarious. Now, Jones could have ended it there, but no, you have to have Ralph just pop out and then open up his parachute. It just pluses that gag. It's fantastic.
The helicopter gag. That's probably my favorite gag of the whole short. It's so perfect and it just fits well. Not just because of the fact that it obviously doesn't work and it's such a quick gag. It's the fact that Ralph gets up after it falls down. He does a little skip, jumps up, tries to use the parachute while floating as if that's gonna work, and then falls flat on his face again. That is some really fantastic timing. That bit killed me. And the sound effects also help too. Like, you don't even hear like little dong. There's like these really harsh like little crashes, and it's always perfect. Treg Brown was a legend in that sort of thing.
And another quick one, we've got your seesaw type gag. So Ralph sets up a lever, throws a rock, and he ends up on a tree and lands right in front of Sam. Now, the gag would have been just okay if it was left like that, but what made this gag work for me is just how Sam ends up turning him into a bowling ball and bowls him, complete with sound effects as well. So at least even in the most simplest of gags, you got something in here that just pluses it and makes it even funnier.
I don't know about you, but I think every time the Warner Brothers cartoons had any sort of bowling gag, they almost always hit the mark and more or less posed for a strike, and this scene is no exception.
So another quickie one here, and this shows why Chuck Jones is a master at timing. Cannon's pushed up, but then in a split moment, Sam doesn't even turn around. He just uses his paw to flick the cannon over, and the cannon ends up shooting Ralph. Again, nice and simple, and works really well. So we got those nice quick succession of gags, but now we're going to slow things down again, and we're going to end up having a nice long gag to finish things off. Ralph's sitting in his cave, he's clearly not successful, and again you can see those bones around, which, I don't know, that's just food from his lunch that day that he might have had if he wasn't successful eating a sheep or whatever.
For all we know, Ralph was just eating, I can't believe it's not mutton or some soy products.
But he notices that there's rain outside, and you'll notice that shorts in this period of time don't really use too much by way of rain because that's an extra expense. But here, it's required to tell the joke, and so I'm glad they went with it. So Ralph notices that it's raining outside, and he has the Acme patented hair grower, and even says guaranteed in the brackets. So this product actually does work as he pours it over Sam, whose top hair ends up growing over his face even more.
The whole thing about the effects is that effects animators were often pretty rare in the Warner Brothers cartoons. They didn't really have enough budget to make big, ambitious stuff. And the thing is, they didn't want to make big, ambitious stuff. They just want to make stuff that was funny. Some of the effects were mainly very simple stuff like water, sometimes fire, or smoke, or rain. If it's enough to make the gag work, then they could definitely do it. And there are only two effects animators that I can definitely find noticeable, or at least were noticeable, in these Warner Brothers shorts because some of their credits appeared at least a few times. One of them was AC Gamer, who was at Warner Brothers starting from the late 30s. His name appears in The Night Watchman. And then there's Harry Love, who effects tend to be more recognizable in the 50s and 60s. He did some incredible stuff around the 50s shorts. I think he might have done some of the rain effects here. But yeah, effects animation was often pretty rare in these Looney Tunes shorts. But even with them being a rarity, they were still very talented effects animators.
Naturally, the rain stops because you don't want to have more rain effects than necessary because, again, it costs a lot of money to do, but it definitely drives the point home.
Hey, if you're going to use your effects animation only once or sparingly, you better use it in just one specific scene, right?
So you got Sam, he's standing there, and you got wonderful animation of Ralph just making sure that Sam can't see. But one interesting thing about this scene is if you look at Ralph's eyes, how it just changes from yellow to white. So I don't know if that was just a coloring mistake or whatever it was, but it was definitely interesting to see.
That could have just been a Technicolor issue. Technicolor was often known to have one or two colors off because the processing was just so complicated back in the day. But even then, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if the change from white to yellow was somewhat intentional. You could even argue that the very moment yellow symbolized Ralph's eventual excitement because he believed that Sam could not see anything. But what do I know? I wasn't there when these cartoons were being made.
I just love the glee in the animation of Ralph as he's just trying to make sure 100% that Sam cannot see.
I also love the timing of that final gag with Ralph using the hair to put on Sam's sheepdog to make him think like, oh, is he actually seeing me? And he does all these like little bits and pieces here and there. I want to say the shot of Ralph trying to see like, oh, is he actually seeing what I'm doing? And he's doing these little flips and stuff. I want to say that was animated by Abe Levitow because some of the timing to me is very familiar to his work on Beanstalk Bunny. You know, the sequence in Beanstalk Bunny where Daffy Duck is like running towards Bugs Bunny and he's like, oh my gosh, he's gonna like kill us and get us out of here. And then like Bugs simply pulls out like the glass cutting thing. That was all Abe Levitow. It's a great scene. And I think he might have done the sequence here with the hair stuff. I'm not a complete expert on Chuck Jones animators. I'm probably an expert on Ben Washam more than I am on the others. So if I'm not correct, someone please do let me know.
And again, this scene actually takes a long period of time, but that's what makes it even funnier because as we go along, after all of that nonsense of Ralph dancing along, he goes down, but then as soon as he touches the sheep, and this is a great bit to slow-mo, by the way, but as soon as he touches the sheep, Sam grabs him and pummels him.
That right there is the funniest bit of timing in the entire cartoon. Every time I watch that bit, I come so close to just bursting out in laughter. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect timing. You could not have done that any better. And I think what makes it even funnier is just how immaculate the layout is. Like, Sam is not super far away, but far away enough that he's in the far back within the background, and Ralph is in the foreground and trying to catch the sheep. And then the second he grabs the sheep leg, you just see a very quick nanosecond shot of Sam just zooming towards him and just beating loving tar out of him. It's perfect.
So again, this is Maltese playing with time here because he always likes to do this kind of gags which have massive build-ups for a very quick payoff, and it works so well here. But we hear the work whistle, so the day has ended.
Yeah, and like I said before, at the end of the day, Ralph and Sam's relationship really isn't anything personal. It's all just business, and they're on good terms. They're good chums outside of work. And I do like that after all is said and done, even with all the beatings, Ralph just kind of takes it. I'm sure he has some form of insurance, or at least I hope he does.
And I like the continuity that any other director might have actually just in the next shot forget the fact that Sam had long hair, but no. He actually keeps it, so I guess maybe he's going to the hairdresser after work today. I don't know. One thing they didn't do, which I was a little disappointed, they did this in the previous short, but you would have what's the passage of time with the colors, so the background sky would end up changing, just reflecting the day has passed, whereas it more or less just stays the same until this very last shot where we see it's getting towards the evening. Is it a massive deal? Not really, but it's just something that I did notice.
Not really. I don't know if this is entirely what Chuck or the crew were thinking, but having made my own short films, more often than not, when you're trying to wrap them up, you've worked so long on it, and you eventually just want to have like one or two backgrounds left, and you're just thinking, okay, well, let's just do this so we can get the thing done on time. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. And if anything, I do like the longer shot. It kind of feels like, okay, all's done. We're able to head off and enjoy our evenings and stuff. And it's a very nice somber piece. I like that Chuck was able to execute stuff like that at the time. And even if it was arguably done to save on resources, it's a good way to do so, you know?
But we end the workday in that really wonderful shot of the sun setting, and we all know that Sam and Ralph will return the next day to continue where they left off, and we end right there. This is one of those shorts where, would you call it a masterpiece? Maybe not, but it's a fun one. It's just a straightforward, competently made short, and it's really funny. None of the gags are duds. It all works. It's all funny. It's well designed, well animated, and there are some bits that just shows that even at this late period of time, there are flashes of absolute brilliance, especially when Ralph is about to touch the sheep and you got Sam just heading down. Again, that one's a great one. Slow-mo. This one gets 8.5 out of 10 because of the fact that it really is a great short to watch. And if you got those 2 Blu-ray sets, you can watch it twice. I mean, hey, it is called Double or Mutton after all.
So overall, I think I'm going to give this short maybe an 8 out of 10. It's a very fun short, and it's got a lot of really fun gags. I guess I'm just not as big of a fan of Ralph or Sam as other people, but as I said, they're still a very fun duo. And if anything, this short was, I would argue, the one that more or less cemented their more definitive relationship that Looney Tunes fans would come to know and fond over, especially the crew behind the new Looney Tunes cartoons. I know they made at least one Ralph and Sam short that more or less followed this formula, but there's just enough funny moments for me to enjoy it. And if nothing else, I really like their working dynamic contrasting with their personal dynamic. It's a nice bit of subversion of expectations, more or less. But yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. Hope you all enjoy the cartoon too.
Yeah, I'm going to rank this an 8 out of 10. It's a very great short. Like, I'm actually going to say it. All of the Sam Sheepdog and Ralph Wolf cartoons all range from good to absolutely fantastic. There is not a single dud in the series, and I think that's also because there's only a few shorts, so maybe Chuck was lucky in not being able to make a few duds of these, because every single one of them is so good, and this one is no exception. We're going to get to a few fantastic ones later on, like Steel Wool and Sheep in the Deep, like you said. But yeah, Double or Mutton is really great. Like, I give it an 8 out of 10. It's a great cartoon with some great gags. The Little Bo Peep gag in particular is very well animated and well timed. The helicopter gag, for me, is the funniest one, and it's so well timed and really funny. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Double or Mutton.
But that will do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.
Have a good day, Anthony. Have a good day, Eli.
Night, Anthony. You're a pal.
Good night, Ralph. See you tomorrow, Sam.